Hello! It's Spoopy. Welcome to Levels Plus Weekly episode 37, the first of the Halloween episodes that I'm doing. And we're going to be splitting some time between talking about some scary games that don't start with a C, end with an A, and have Castlevania in the title. Which includes some of the ones featured here that you can barely see. I've also got a monstrous amount of pickups that will probably comprise the second half of the episode, just to keep things on the lighter side, since we're going to be in the long haul for a whole bunch of Smash stuff in November. So let's go ahead and transition into why we're here. Let's talk about Dead Space, because Dead Space 2 is a top 20 game for me in terms of gameplay and in terms of just really awesome handling of a space station gone awry with dead things. Dead Space 2 is such a great game, but I do want to double back to the first game because I think it actually handles the horror aspect better. So Dead Space 1 puts you into a ship that has mysteriously gone silent, and once you enter that ship as engineer Isaac Clarke, you discover why. It's because it has been infested with necromorphs, which are reanimated corpses that have been horribly mangled into new beings of flesh, bone, and sinew that are weak in their limbs. So I'm a necromorph. You want to go for these things, not this thing so much, but these things. It's a really clever idea of twisting the conventions of the genre in terms of how you deal with enemies. That's one of the things I love about it so much. It also is really creepy. The first Dead Space has a beautifully morbid vibe around it through the whole game. And I think part of it, and why it works better in 1 instead of 2, is that Isaac is dead silent through the entire game. And you're not even sure how much he's actually physically there in terms of like what he's doing, because he's hallucinating and going through drastic mental duress from what's called the marker. And the marker is a alien artifact that causes this destruction of the human form on so many levels. And part of what has happened is that it has been turned into a religious object by a particular cult, which is plot impetus ultimately for the 3 games that I enjoy in the series, which is 1, 2, and Extraction. Extraction takes place before 1, so it's a prequel, but it's also a rail shooter, so it does things a little differently. But it's also one of the best rail shooters I've ever played, and it really captures the vibe of Dead Space really well. So it's also recommended if you have a Wii or a last 2-gen ago console, or something that can play it. I think it was only on PS3 though. I don't know if it came out on the Xbox 360. But anyway, Dead Space Extraction is also good. Dead Space 1 is exceptionally good. It's a top 111 game. Primarily for the mood, the atmosphere, the gameplay is solid, but it's not as good as 2. And in a lot of ways, it is the prototype for what 2 would become. And 2 is one of the best action horror games ever made, right behind Resident Evil 4, in my opinion. And while Isaac has a personality, it's good, it's effective, it works well within the dynamics of the game. It pushes the psychological aspects harder, which I greatly appreciate. It's definitely more Silent Hill-like than Resident Evil in terms of like the story beats that it tries to follow, but I think that makes it really effective. The thing about Dead Space 2 is that it controls like a dream. It's a wonderful game to play, and the set pieces are glorious. You're now on a planet that has been locked down because of the marker. There's a bunch of new necromorph types to deal with, and some of the like creepiest locales I've ever played in a game. There's like a daycare that you have to go through, and it is just really unsettling and effective. The reason why Dead Space 2 is so high, in my opinion, is just all the pieces come together to make a fantastic game experience, except for the very end where they force you to try to shove a needle into your eye, which I have an eye phobia, and that's just, I can't do that. I managed to do it when I played through it the first time, but now I just kind of consider the rest of the game after that to be something that exists that I'll never re-experience personally, because I'm not doing that again. But Dead Space 1 and 2, fantastic, creepy, delightful games to play that I absolutely adore. It's the best thing EA's done in years. I'm apprehensively excited about the new one that's a remake of the first game, but I really wish it wasn't a remake. I wish it was just doing something else with this idea instead of retreading old ground, but I'm not marketing or corporate EA, so what do I know? Next, I'm going to get into Silent Hill. I adore the first 3 games in the series a ton. 2 and 3 are in my top 111. I think that Silent Hill 2 is the better of the games in terms of most areas: gameplay, narrative, music, aesthetics. But Heather, right here, this is art I did in 2009. Heather is the greatest protagonist in any horror game and is one of the best protagonists in all of games, and I love her, and therefore Silent Hill 3 is my favorite. Also, You're Not Here is the best intro song and arguably the greatest video game song of all time. It's really up there. I think it's in my top 3. It might even be number 1. I can't remember anymore. I'll put a little note down here once I look it up. While Silent Hill 3 is a little bit weaker in terms of story and in terms of just like the grimy horror and environments, in contrast to 2, and 2 just has the most amazing story that works so effectively. I just love Heather. I really do. She's such a great character. Her design is so good, and her personality is so good, and her voice actress, who's also named Heather, if I remember right, just knocked out of the park for a PS2 era dub. Just kills that role. So good. Finn agrees. Finn 100% agrees that Heather is the best protagonist in any horror game. Yes. Yes, he does. Pyramid Head is one of the best antagonists, and I love so many of the enemies in 2 and 3 especially. I have a Pyramid Head figure and a Silent Hill Bubblehead Nurse figure coming at some point. I wish they were here so they could hang out with the other spoopy things that I put on display, but they're not here yet. But that's okay. But I love the thing about Silent Hill is its atmosphere. 1, 2, and 3 have amazing atmosphere that is so industrial, so morbid and gross and rusty, I guess I should say, and just chills, mad chills to the bones. Atmosphere, sound design is impeccable. Akira Yamaoka is a god of sound design and music with these games. Just incredible atmosphere. And all 3 of them have solid characters. I think that Heather's the best, obviously, if I haven't hammered that home enough. But I think that Harry and James are also solid protagonists. And James is definitely one of the most faulty, unreliable protagonists in any video game. I'm not going to ruin it here in case you haven't played it. But just really well done. That's why Silent Hill 2 is the better game, even though I slot 3 as my favorite. is because James's narrative and story are superbly told, and it's one of the best psychological horror games ever made in terms of that. Just wonderfully done. Just a great series that it's such a shame that it's really hard to get a hold of them now. That basically the PS1 and PS2 are still the best ways to play those games. I hope that Konami rectifies that at some point soon. I didn't like The Room. I will say that. I didn't care for that. They changed the gameplay much in that and all. And I think that Henry is the most milquetoast, vanilla, boring, dull character that has ever existed. Had to follow up Heather. Such a great character with that snooze fest of a character. It's really unfortunate. And then Team Silent left after The Room. I also tried Shattered Memories, but I just didn't like how they changed that game a whole lot. Gameplay wise, it's very boring for me. I don't think it's interesting running away in an ice world from creatures you can't fight. I just don't enjoy that, especially since you don't really have a sense of direction. So I also wore my Silent Hill shirt with pyramid heads, knife, just chilling here. So in terms of like the world building and the narrative and the design, I love Silent Hill the most of all these franchises. But in terms of the franchise that I think I have the most love of the lore and the characters and just the gameplay, it's gotta be Resident Evil. I mean, that series has been something I have been devoted to since its inception, practically. Even though I couldn't play it until the N64 2 came out. That was the first one I played, and then Code Veronica was pretty close to that as well. Those two games just kind of cemented this series as one that I adore. And I actually have the biggest, the most fandom about Resident Evil, to the point that I just am so upset about 6 and to an extent 5 still. 6 dropped the ball so hard that it's one of my least favorite games of all time, and it disappoints me how much that game just went off the rails. It really does. I almost feel like it character assassinated Leon and Chris so hard that Chris became one of my least favorite characters, because that's who I when Chris comes up, that's who I veer towards. And unfortunately, it's like anytime Chris is on the screen retroactively or after that game, I don't like him. I just don't. I don't like Chris Redfield anymore because of 6. It just murdered that character for me. Leon was better. I feel that Matt Mercer did an admirable job of trying to keep that goofiness that existed for Leon beforehand, that Paul Mercier did beautifully in Resident Evil 4, which is the best one. 4 is still the best one. Mercer tried, and I give him props for that, but still, they lost so much of his personality in the writing of 6. And then they also tried to character assassinate Ada, even though it's the best design Ada's had is in 6. Still tried to just totally screw her over. Sherry got the best deal out of all of the returning characters. And her mode's the funnest, in my opinion. But there's so many things with 6. Read up on 6. Here, so I don't talk about 6 the whole time. 2 is the best classic one. I love 2. It's still my favorite of all of the old school ones, including the remake of 1. I think that 2 just does so much right with Leon and Claire being wonderful characters. Ada is also interesting, and Sherry is interesting. William Birkin becoming G is just a fascinating villain turn. I love that so much. Mr. X is a fantastic secondary antagonist as well. And I really want to play the remake of 2 so bad, because it looks like it just nailed everything that I would have hoped it would be on maybe more stuff in the city than it has, but beyond that, it's just so good, what I've watched of it. Code Veronica is the most troubled. Steve is a horrible character and was a really bad addition. He's too corny. Too corny and too just dissonant from what that game's trying to do. And I feel that Alfred Ashford is a really bad transphobic character, unfortunately, that if they remake Code Veronica, I'd be really interested to see how they address that, and I hope that they would. Alexia Ashford, however, is awesome. I think she's fantastic in Code Veronica. And Wesker is also, that's where my love of Wesker came from, was from Code Veronica, when he came back and has these red eyes and is doing this cool stuff. And then he went on to be the best part of 5 by a long shot, thanks to DC Douglas just nailing that voice work. So Code Veronica, I have mixed things. I still have it. I have it again. But it's a game that could have been better. Nemesis, I also feel the same way about, is that I'm glad that Jill got another game, and all to herself, practically. And Nemesis is a cool concept. I like the idea quite a bit. But it's a bit rough, and it's not as polished as 2. And unfortunately, the remake kind of repeated that. It ended up not being as good as 2. But it's fine. Let's get to the remake. I bounced off it with the GameCube. I think at that point I had played 2 Nemesis and Code Veronica and was just kind of over the tank controls. But the remaster is superb and really shows off what the GameCube game was doing, because it's gorgeous still. And I don't think that they changed a whole lot. I think it's the same assets, just it improved in quality, and the way that Capcom built it was really smart for future-proofing it. But when I replayed it last year, I want to say, it was fun. I had a lot of fun with it. I walked around with an FAQ, so I didn't run into any trouble with puzzles or anything like that, and had a really good time. The biggest issue I have with the remaster is they redid Jill's model, so they gave her breast physics, which weren't in the GameCube game, and that's annoying. Stop it. 4 is the greatest Resident Evil game ever. It's just recently fell out of my top 15. It's now 17 or 18. I don't quite remember. It's still in my top 20, but it is one of the greatest games ever made. I love it so much. The Wii port is the best way to play it because it controls like a dream. It's the best execution of Wii controls ever done. And Leon just, like I said, Paul Mercier just hammed it up perfectly as Leon, and the villains were all in on it. It's a campy game, but I love it because of its camp, and it's creepy in the best ways. It's scary in great ways. I think it handles the escort mission component better than most games. It's still not perfect, and Ashley is kind of obnoxious, but on the grand scheme of things, it's a great game, and has some of the greatest bosses I've ever experienced. Regenerators are some of the best enemies of all time. Amazing set pieces. Some of the greatest moment-to-moment gameplay I've ever experienced. Impeccably designed. Maybe a little long, but it's lovely despite that. And the merchant system just reinvigorated, like getting weapons. But it's the behind the back gameplay, camera idea that revolutionized video games. Resident Evil 4 is one of the few games that redefined what an action game was going to be, and so many games followed it, including Dead Space. It's so wonderfully designed that way that it opened up a whole new world for games, and not many games can say that. So I love RE4. It's a lovely game. 5 is problematic and racist in a lot of ways, and it's unfortunate because it's fun. It goes a little bit more on the action side than RE4 did, so it's not the same experience. It's not as spooky. It's not as creepy. Wesker's fantastic in it. Shiva is fantastic in it. Sheva, I should say. Sheva is fantastic in it. Chris is a meathead. And the worst protagonist. I always play a Sheva. But it's set in Africa, and you're a white military man shooting a whole bunch of people in Africa. It's really, really classless. It's kind of disgusting. And Capcom addressed this by making it multicultural for some reason. Which might have worked, except then you get into like the native population area. And that's bad. That's not good. Yeah, just one of the most racist games I've played, and it's just really unfortunate that Capcom decided to go that route, and the way they tried to doctor it up to make it less so didn't work. It did not work. And I haven't played 7 and 8. I've watched them. I want to play them. I think both look great. I do think that Ethan suffers from Henry syndrome from Silent Hill 4, in that he's a very uninteresting, boring, dull, white male, milquetoast protagonist that I am not very enthused about playing the games as. And 8 really amplified that even more. He was easily the worst part of 8, in my opinion. But I want to play them, and they're on my docket. When I get a PlayStation 5, I'm going to get those. So those are all of my favorite spoopy games all lined up. There's probably some others that I could say inspire that feeling of dread and tension. But these are the classics, in my opinion. These are the ones that I turn to when I think of scary games. But they are not the only games that run with a horror aesthetic. In fact, my favorite franchise of all time sure does that, and we're going to just pour one out. We're going to throw a wine glass that I don't have at Castlevania for Halloween, which is very appropriate because it actually lands on Halloween, so that's super rad. So we're going to jump into an intermission now, and then we'll hit all of the many, many pickups I've got this week. Hello, welcome back. I've just gotten my Femtendo order. Very excited about it. So I'm a little out of focus because I wanted to make sure when I hold the carts up that you could actually see them. So as you can see, my hand is more in focus. Don't worry about it. It's all good. I got a lot of good stuff, and considering I spent $200 on this with the shipping, some of the stuff I got is pretty impressive, I gotta say. Actually, we'll start with the most expensive thing I got, which sounds so silly, but it's Rockman. The original Rockman was the most expensive thing I bought. It was just under $50. I don't know what it is. Both the American and the Japanese version of this game are expensive, but for like 5 seconds of roll, I had to have this for book 1. Or book 2. I'm on book 2 now. Wow. Yeah, that is a thing. Speaking of book 2, I also got Heracles no Elko. I can't quite remember what the end part is, but it's Glory of Heracles series. And there's quite a few women that appear in this, two of which I'm considering major because they're bosses. In terms of other stuff for book 2, I've got 2 sports games right here, so we'll go ahead and talk about those. So I've got Dynamite Bowl, which was the first bowling game on the Famicom. Also ended up being one of the first sports games with women as a selectable option, outside of volleyball. And then a much later one, this is Gold Medal Challenge 92 in North America. I don't remember, I think it's Capcom in Barcelona 92. It's basically Capcom trying to do a track and field game. I've always been kind of curious about it, and there's a couple of events where female athletes compete. In terms of other stuff from book 2, there's also Chesterfield, which has 2 prominent women that I wanted to talk about, as well as many minor characters. And then I think this is the last one. I forget what this one's called, but it is Yuma Misa. I forget her name. I apologize. I think I actually said it right earlier. This is the first in a series of 3 games. They're graphic adventure mystery games. And Catherine is your assistant as you solve murder mysteries, and she's at least in the first 2. So that's why I have it, is primarily for her. But there's also victims and NPCs and such. So the rest of these are for the future. Although there will be one more that does feature into this book, which is Hiro no Ken 2. You can see Min Min to the right of the central character. She's the first one to the right. Min Min is in there for Hiro no Ken 1, but she also appears in 2 and 3. And she's actually got a bit of a complicated localization history, so that one's going to be fun to talk about. Another one that'll be making a little appearance in book 2 is this one, which is Juji Saburo Yokohama ko Renzoku Satsujin Jiken. Which is part of the, I can't remember the Japanese name, but the Jake Hunter game series. This is the second one, but Yoko is prominent enough in all of these that I'm trying to get them all. I might not be able to do that, but I'm trying. Okay, the rest of these are all for the future, and the first one up is Parallel World, which is a game where the girlfriend character on the left there can be player number 2. So this is a cooperative game. Next up is the Quest of Key. Key is the princess in the Tower of Duraga series, and in the original game you rescue her, but this is a prequel showing how she got in the tower. And then we've got Metal Max. This is another Data East RPG. This has a few women that are characters on your party. And I got Faria. Now, this is the crazy thing. Faria, this cost under $3 for me to buy this game in its Japanese format. If I were to buy it in America, this would be $150 for a bear cart. $200 to $250 for a boxed copy. Just not worth it. Since it also had like a 2-year head start. I went ahead and got it for the Famicom, and I feel really good about it. Another one I feel really good about is The Legend of Ghost Lion, or I think it was like White Lion no Densetsu in Japan. This is based on an anime, but because of what it was localized into, I had to get it. But getting it in America is way too expensive, so I'm just going to have to use this as the representation because it basically is the same game. They just kind of hand-wave the license away. This is Niji no Silk Road. The main character that you see here rescues a Jin at the very beginning of the game, pretty close to it, who is a woman fairy-like character and helps you with item management and identification. And then this is the last regular cart I've got, which is Dungeon Kid, an early game by Quest, the makers of Ogre Battle. There's a couple classes that are women, and this one's kind of interesting because you get to choose if you want to play it as a fantasy backdrop or a sci-fi backdrop, which is kind of unique. The last three are tall Konami titles from the later development period. So this one is Esper Dream 2. I've heard great things about this game, so I'm pretty excited to play it at some point whenever I can get the capacity to play these cards. There's a few support characters that are women that help the main character out. And then I've got Ganbare, Goemon, Gaiden. I have the sequel to this, but this first one is important for our tally because it introduces the most regular woman character in the series, whose name I forget. It starts with a Y. I'm going to put it right here. And last but not least is, I think, probably one of the coolest games that is on the Famicom, and it's a little hard to see, but this is the Grange Point, and there is a woman of color. It's awesome that Konami has a woman of color so prominent on this box art and cartridge art. So I am very excited to learn more about this game. There's a couple other women that appear on here, but I'm very curious to learn more about that. And that's what I got. Like I said, I got all of this for a little under $200. So there's more pickups because I have a whole bunch of stuff in the mail. So we'll just transition to another day. I got the last couple of things for pickups, so let's just run through them real quick. So I got from Limited Run Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection Volume 1. I just got the standard on this one. It would have been cool to have the book and all that, but I just couldn't justify the cost. What's cool about this is that I did buy 4 of these games individually before they announced this, which, you know, it's kind of a bummer, but I did learn that the save data carries over into this, which I tested out just now, and my Match of the Millennium stuff was all there, so that's really cool. And they also made it easier to unlock the characters in that game, so that will be nice. I also got from Nintendo the Metroid Dread posters they were doing through My Nintendo. Look how shiny. There was 2 of them. And been waiting for something to spend my points on, and this was perfect. I think I might actually frame these because they're really nice. And that is that on the pickup front. So I think we'll just go ahead and cut it here. We'll have it be a little bit of a shorter episode. So thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it very much. Hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time for some Castlevania goodness. And possibly more pickups. We'll have to see. All right, friends. Take care. I'm pretty stoked about that. So we're going to take a little intermission now and jump into the pickup.